Have you ever been dissatisfied with an aspect of your artwork, feel like your style isn't consistent, or can't seem to find time for creativity? Well, you're not alone, and it's quite natural for creatives to experience things like this. But at the same time, I think we often make these moments more painful and drawn out than they need to be, by not taking action. That being said, actions that result in change are some of the most difficult things for people to grapple with. So in something akin to procrastination, we end up stewing in dissatisfaction or frustration in an attempt to avoid the discomfort of change. Some people may choose to call this artist block, but I prefer to view it as friction in the creative process. And in this video, I want to give you concrete ways to reduce friction and improve creativity, but before that, I need to address something. The general public's story around creativity, where only when the artist is graced with the presence of the muse can they create, has been around for centuries, and while poetic, it's not a great way to actually lead a healthy yet creative life that's sustainable. And it propagates the unfortunate trope of the tortured artist, where we suffer when the muse doesn't show up, or when we're self-conscious about our work, and when we can't seem to find time to be creative. For people struggling with these issues, you may want to take a step back and reassess your story around creativity. For me, I found the solution to these issues in something most people would consider the furthest thing from creativity: systems. I know, systems aren't sexy. In fact, the word itself has a pretty negative connotation, often associated with the education system or court system, which are viewed as rigid and devoid of creativity. But after years of struggling in different creative fields, I found systems not only helped me make time for creative endeavors, but also helped me produce consistent results I could be proud of. So I invite those who are struggling, or maybe even just a bit curious, to give me a few minutes of their time so I can present some real-world examples where systems help me make positive changes in my art, workflow, and life. Regardless of whether you're self-taught or formally educated, it's easy to get lost in the excitement of the creative process, only to view your work with disappointment after a night's sleep. For me, anatomy that I thought was accurate would become obviously unnatural, colors I thought blended beautifully would clash, or rendering that felt rooted in logic was far from it, which led to plenty of frustration and wasted time trying to fix these errors at the worst possible stage of a piece. Recognizing a pattern, with a willingness to change and a desire to improve, I humbly went back to basics, but to my surprise, while there was some improvement, I was still consistently dissatisfied with my finished pieces. My problem was not a lack of experience or technique or even patience. It was due to a lack of systems. Have you ever gone to the supermarket only to return home without that one essential item, yet somehow ended up with plenty of unnecessary items? This was a constant problem for me and was present even in my drawing process. It came down to this: if a process, including even creative ones, are based solely on intuition and reliant on memory, they are prone to all kinds of issues. We forget, we get distracted, we skip steps or even repeat steps. And often, we do so subconsciously without realizing just how much frustration we're actually causing ourselves. In contrast, if you develop and defer to a system, you're less reliant on your memory or emotional state, and more likely to complete the task in a way that's satisfactory. Or to put it simply, if you have a checklist, you're more likely to do the necessary tasks faster and with fewer distractions or issues. Checklists are constantly present in our lives, from the supermarket to air travel, but no matter how clear the benefits were laid out to me, it was very difficult for me to see them implemented into my creative workflows. After all, stereotypes around art come from some grains of truth, as many of us value the freedom found in the creative process. But after actually implementing these systems into my workflow, I found structure could give me more freedom in a way I never expected. With the choice of what to do and when being decided before I even started a piece, friction in the creative process was reduced, yet I felt more free to experiment within those constraints and found myself more easily entering a state of flow. Ultimately, with the finished piece being more satisfactory, I also found myself spending less time trying to polish or save a piece, and more time actually creating new works of art. To create a successful checklist, I recommend taking a step back to look at your body of work, selecting a few pieces that you feel best represent your style, and creating a checklist based on how you successfully crafted that piece. I would also highly recommend creating a subsystem for this checklist, where you include and organize the tools and materials used in each step, saving templates and presets wherever possible. Continuing with the cooking analogy, if you have an organized kitchen and take a few minutes to lay out or pre-measure ingredients, you're less likely to waste time and get distracted or make critical mistakes while cooking. For years, believing that art had to be spontaneous, I would throw myself at a blank canvas without much thought, only to slow down to a crawl when it came to later steps. While sketching with the default pencil is often a frictionless and straightforward task, needing to create specific brushes, find assets, decide on a palette, and choosing tools for rendering are much less straightforward tasks that can break your flow if they demand too much attention. Like a recipe, a checklist is important, but so are the steps one level below that, the preparation and sub-recipes. Having these tools and systems to default to is all in the pursuit of reducing friction and excess thinking to more easily be able to channel your limited supplies of energy into the creative aspects of your work. Organizing your workspace or file structures, creating a color palette or custom presets, and assigning keyboard shortcuts just takes a few minutes, but these small subsystems can save you hours over time. Using systems like this is a fantastic way to supplement an existing creative process, but for those who are struggling to find time or stuck on the blank canvas, you can also use systems to leverage accountability and be less reliant on your emotional state. The last thing most of us want to do after a long day, even for a chef, is to come home and have to think about cooking, let alone take action. Even with a tidy kitchen and recipes at hand, we understandably often lack the mental energy to make decisions or get started. But what if we can take thinking out of the equation? Or rather, create a system where we no longer have to think or make decisions in our most vulnerable states. Joining a local artist get-together, scheduling a live stream, or booking a class are all systems to leverage accountability and reduce friction that result in positive action. Whereas if we leave it up to spontaneity or your current emotional state, you're more likely to defer to the next day, which becomes a cycle, and you never end up engaging in the creative activity. While a class can be a great system to motivate yourself and learn a new skill, they do require a significant commitment of time and money. For those who can't quite commit to a class but still want to find time to engage or improve in art, it's so important to reduce friction with systems that break down big tasks into smaller, more approachable segments. By focusing on a new aspect of anatomy each week for just 5 minutes a day, we can slowly build up skills and accomplish a goal that on its face feels like an impossible task. And this example also helps highlight something of a hidden benefit of systems. Without structure, creativity can feel very boom or bust. It's common for someone to overexert themselves, working on a piece for several hours straight, burning themselves out, only to not engage with creativity for several days afterwards. I don't find this to be a sustainable or even enjoyable way to approach creativity. Instead, we can take a page out of the school system. When we apply structure to our time, we leverage accountability to more easily engage with and dedicate ourselves to a task, but also without bumping up to the line of diminishing returns. When we reach our peak, we stop and come back the next day, fresh and ready to continue. Like school, the system doesn't necessarily have immediate results, but if you look at the whole picture, it is an effective way to build up to a creative goal. When my main creative outlet was just drawing, this is an extremely difficult concept for me to grasp, and I was caught up in the stereotypes, reluctant to change, or constantly battling with friction. The blank canvas or page may be a symbol for freedom of expression and creativity, but it too has its limitations. And unfortunately, our stories around other art forms and creative outlets is not always the best approach. It was only after some career pivots into motion pictures and expanding my hobbies to include cooking that I got the perspective to know there was a better way for my creative process. I included many analogies to cooking because I feel like it's a relatable example that is often viewed as both creative and systematic. Filmmaking is also widely accepted as a creative art form, but it also requires systems to bridge different aspects of production over set schedules with lots of money on the line. When it comes to both cooking and filmmaking, structure provides an outlet for creativity, reducing friction and breaking down complex tasks into manageable, repeatable activities. Again, I know that systems aren't sexy and it doesn't make for a catchy headline, but in this video, I purposely avoided using more provocative terms like artist block, as I feel it reinforces false stigmas of creativity. When you're experiencing difficulty with your art, throwing up your hands and declaring artist block is honestly the easy way out. And what you're saying is that my terms and demands must be satisfied before I even begin to work. But you shouldn't have to negotiate with yourself to be creative. What you're dealing with is too much friction in your process. There will always be some kind of friction in creativity. If it were completely gone, I think you wouldn't be making interesting work. But when there's too much friction, it becomes difficult to take action, and we put the blame on something external like artist block or whatever term you want to use, and then we double down and try to force change, which only adds more friction to the process. But we can instead invite systems into our workflow to alleviate some of that unnecessary friction and let ourselves more easily engage with the work, enter states of flow, and achieve work we're proud of. Anyways, I hope you found this video essay interesting or informative. If you did, I would sincerely appreciate you sharing this with someone else that could benefit from it. While I tend to make these videos to help myself better understand our relationship to art and technology, I know that I'm not the only one thinking about this topic, and I hope this video finds its audience. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.